Parshas Tazria begins with the parsha of the Yoledes, the woman who's had a child. And the Torah says that a Yoledes is Tmeya, that she is ritually impure. So the question is, of course, what is the basis of Tumas Yoledes? As a woman gives birth, it's a very, very great experience. Perhaps it's the most godlike thing that a human being can do, to give birth to a child. So why should that be associated with a tumah, an impurity? The parsha goes on to explain that there's a distinction between the Yoledes Zohar and the Yoledes Nekeva. If the woman gives birth to a male child, so she is tameh for 7 days, and for 33 days she's in the state of Tvulas Yoim Oruch, which means she's immersed on the 7th day, and she becomes pure with sundown 33 days later. So it's kind of an intermediary period. In the case of Yoledes Nekeva, she's Tmeya for 14 days, and she's at Tvulas Yom Aruch for 66 days. So the days of Tumah are doubled. And the question is, why should there be a greater or longer Tumah for Yoledes Nekeva, for a woman who gives birth to a female child, as opposed to a woman who gives birth to a male child? Also a serious question in the parsha, something we've discussed in past years. Then the Torah goes down to discuss that at the end of her period of impurity, the following day, she comes to the Beis Hamikdash and brings the carbon. So, what is the carbon? So if she can afford it, she brings a sheep as a oila and the bird as a chatas. If she can't afford it, she brings 2 birds. One is an oila, one is a chatas. What is the idea of a carbon? Usually a carbon is a kapara. What is being atoned for here? What is the aveira involved? So here there seems to be a shaila in Chazal. The Gemara in Nidah, in the Lamed Aleph, says that a Yoledes is assumed to have committed a chet. What chet? That in her labor, during the intense pain, she swears that she will no longer have relations with her husband, which of course is an oath. Ramban explains that it doesn't take effect, because the woman is meshubah, the woman is obligated, that's part of the marriage contract, and therefore she can't make a vow that would forbid having relations with her husband. But nevertheless, she wanted to make such a vow, which is a chet, therefore she requires a kapara, she requires an atonement. So it would seem from that Gemara that the Gemara understands that the chatas of a Yoledes, the sin offering of a Yoledes, really is a atonement for a chet. But it seems that the Gemara in Zvachim and the Tzadi goes otherwise. And the Gemara there makes a very interesting observation. We know there are many places in the Torah where a person brings a pair of birds as a carbon. For example, in Parshas Vayikra we have the carbon oil of Yored. Certain averis, the carbon is on a sliding scale. If a person is wealthy, a person brings a certain carbon. If a person is poor, a different carbon. If he's very poor, a different carbon. So the Torah says for a person who's not very rich, not very poor, he's just average poor, dalus, so the carbon oil of Yored involves 2 birds. But there the order of the birds is echad chatas, the echad oila. The first one is the chatas, and the second is the oila. Likewise, in Parshas Mitzayra, next week's parsha, we have the karbonos of a zav and a zava. So there too, they bring pairs of birds, and again, one is a chatas and one is an oila. In the Parshas Mitzayra, when it speaks of the karbonos of Mitzayra as well, a Mitzayra brings 3 karbonos. He brings an asham, a chatas, and an oila. So the Torah says if he's poor, he brings a sheep for the asham and 2 birds for the chatas and the oila. Again, the first is the chatas and the second is the oila. The one exception is by Yoledes. By Yoledes, the Torah says the opposite. The first is the oila and the second is a chatas. So the Gemara in Zvachim Daf Tzadi asks why this is. Now the Gemara points out that in actual practice, even in the case of a Yoledes, the Chatas was brought before the Oila. L'mikra hakdima hakasif. It's only in the Psukim that the Oila is placed first. But nevertheless, it's noteworthy. In every other case, the Torah mentions the Chatas first and then the Oila, and here it mentions the Oila and then the Chatas. How do you explain that? So the Gemara gives several reasons why this is. But one of the reasons the Gemara says is that there's a rule of thumb, that whenever the carbon comes for a chet, so you have the Chatas first and then the Oila. And whenever the carbon comes not for a chet, you have the Oila first and then the Chatas. And that's why Yoledes is different, because the carbon of Yoledes does not come for a chet, and therefore the order is Oila and then Chatas. So at first glance, it seems that this Gemara in Zvachim is going out like the Gemara Nidah. The Gemara Nidah says that the Yoledes brings a carbon because she does commit a chet. She swears that she won't be together with her husband. And yet, the Gemara in Zvachim says that the reason the order in the Torah is reversed, and in Parshas Tazria, we have the Oila of the Yoledes before the Chatas, is the Gemara says, because since it doesn't come for a chet, so the rule is that the Torah writes the Oila before the Chatas. This is the Gemara in Zvachim and Daf Tzadi. Now, just as an aside, the cheshbon, why this makes a difference, whether it comes for a chet or not, is very, very pashut. Because the Gemara in Zvachim says in that Zayin and Beis that the symbolism of the chatas and then the oila is like this. Let's say a person committed a crime. So first he has a praklit, first he has a lawyer go in and argue his case and get an acquittal. And then, after that, the person sends a dora, and he sends a gift, a present, to the melech. Obviously, as long as he's still at risk of life and limb, it's not appropriate at that point to send the dora. But once the praklit gets him off the hook, then he sends the dora. So the Gemara says that the chatas is the praklit, the ola is the dora. So therefore, as a rule, whenever the chet obligates the carbon, so you have the chatas and then the oila. That's the order. Praklit and then dora. Here by Yoledes, since it's not for a chet, then the order is the opposite, the oila and then the chatas. Though we still have to understand what the rationale for that is. What is the idea of an oila before a chatas? We'll talk about that perhaps. But it says Yoledes is different. In any case, it seems that the Gemara in Zvachim and the Tzadi, which says that the reason by Yoledes the oila is before the chatas is because it doesn't come for a chet, is going not like the Gemara in Nidah, which says that there is a chet. Rabbeinu Bechaya, here in this week's Parsha, says something which is rather cryptic. It's hard to understand what he means. He writes the following: V'yitachem lefarish. It's possible to explain. She'ein ha'karban hazeh mitzad chet shalatzmi. The carbon of the Yoledes is not to atone for her sin. She commits no sin. The woman having the baby is not committing any sin. Rak mitzad ima. The carbon is to atone for her mother's sin, her mother being Chava, shehi haisa em kol chai, who is the mother of all people. In other words, every Yoledes that brings a carbon is coming to atone for the chet of Chava, the chet of the Eitz Hadas. Ki lulei hachetahu, because it had not been for the chet of the Eitz Hadas, haya ha'adam meilid im ishto shelo b'derech taiva v'cheshek. Men and women would have had children not through desire. As it is, how are children conceived? Through desire. The man and the woman have desire for each other. As a result, a child is conceived. But if not for the chet, there would have been no element of desire, and children would have been born not b'derech taiva v'cheshek, ela b'derech hateva hagomor. It would have been a totally natural process. Kiteva ho'ilan hamotzi peiroisav b'chol shana shelo b'taiva, like a tree that bears fruit every year. There's no desire, there's no cheshek, there's no taiva that the tree experiences. This is the teva. The teva of the tree is that it bears fruit. So that would have been what childbearing would have been like if not for the chet of Adam Harishon. Vayoledes hazu, and this woman who had a child, again through the process of cheshek, ki ima ubita b'maisa hachet. She is like her mother, and she is like the child of that mother in the act of sin. Ki ha'anafim hemu kolkolim b'kilkal ha'shayrish. When the root is miskalkel, when the root is ruined, the branch is also ruined. Now, l'chara, this is based on what Rabbi Eliezer says in Parshas Bereshis. This is a very interesting thing, because we always think that desire was the consequence of the chet. Because of the chet of eating from the Eitz Hadas, therefore man acquired desire. But Rabbi Eliezer says over there that really the cause of the chet was desire. Chava desired the fruit, and that's why she committed the chet. And there are 5 different lashonos of desire. Vatera ha'isha, ki nechmu ra'is lahaskil, v'chitava hulaynayim. There are 5 different expressions. And that was the cause of the chet, of course. The result of the chet was that desire was compounded. But at the root of the chet was also desire, and this woman who had a child through the process of desire, in a sense, walked in her mother's footsteps. And therefore, al-kain yasrichena ha-kosuv karbon l'chaper al-chet kadmoni. And therefore, she has to bring a carbon to mechaper for the ancient chet. A little hard to understand exactly. So it's really not a kapara for her chet, it's a kapara for Chava's chet. Why is she bringing a kapara for Chava's chet? Because she walks in the same way. So therefore, that somehow creates an obligation for her to atone for Chava's chet. Hard to understand. But he explains, and this explains why the oil is before the Chatas. Because normally, what is an oil mechaper for? An oil is mechaper, we learned a few weeks ago, and the oil is mechaper for hiur halev. Now normally when you bring a carbon chatas, the oil really has no place, because a carbon chatas comes for a chet that was done inadvertently. So there was no machshava at all. So there the ikar is the chatas is mechaper for the maisa, and the oil which follows the chatas is, as the Gemara says, only a dorain. Mashenkin over here, since the kapara for Chava was a kapara for a chet that was rooted in desire, so there was an illicit machshava even before the maisa. Therefore, the oila comes before the chatas. This is what Rabbi Eliezer says. Again, it's very, very cryptic. I was thinking perhaps this is not what Rabbi Eliezer means, but perhaps since Rabbi Eliezer does mention Chava, there is a way, in light of the story of Chava, we can understand something about the Parsha of the Yoledes. Not exactly Rabbi Eliezer, but picking up on the remez that he introduces. When we go back to Parshas Bereshis, and we read the story of Chava, there are a few noteworthy things. The pasuk says that after Chava was created and she was brought to Adam, Adam gave her a name. Lezos yikarei Isha, ki meish lukach azos. She should be called Isha because she came from Ish. Ish is the Hebrew word for man, and a woman is a counterpart, and therefore the most appropriate name is Isha. So that was the first name that Adam gave the woman, Isha. He is Ish, she is Isha. Then we have the whole story of the Eitz Hadas, and after the Eitz Hadas, and after the punishments that were assigned, it says, Vayikra ha'adam shem ishto Chava. Adam called her name Chava, ki hi ha'isa em kol chai, because she was the mother of all living things. So the question is that this pasuk doesn't belong here. This pasuk really belongs before the story of the Eitz Hadas. As soon as when she was brought to Adam, Adam gave her a name. So why does the story of the Eitz Hadas interrupt? If you look in Rashi says explicitly that this pasuk of Vayikra ha'adam shem ishto Chava really is a continuation of that which was written before the Chet of Eitz Hadas. There's nothing per se to do with the Chet of Eitz Hadas. But that's not the simple reading of the Psukim. The simple reading of the Psukim seems to tell us that before the Chet, she had one name. Before the Chet, her name was Isha. After the Chet, she was given a different name, Chava, because she was Eim Kol Chai, because she is the mother of all humanity. The question is, l'chora, she was destined to be the mother of all humanity even before the Chet. So what changed? Why is it only after the Chet she gets the name Chava? Another interesting thing is, if you look at the curses that were given to Chava, it says as follows: Eloisha Amar, to the woman, Hashem said, Harba arbe itzvoneich, I will increase your distress, veheironeich, and the pain associated with pregnancy, be'etzav tel divanim, in pain you will give birth to children. So the Gemara in Erevin says that Eser Klolais Niskal Chava, it's more in Erevin Daf Kufim of days, that Chava was given 10 curses, and this pasuk refers to 3 of them. It's Voneich is Tsar Gidul Bonim, the pain of child rearing. Heironeich is the pain of pregnancy, and Be'etzav Tel Divanim is the pain of childbirth, labor. So the obvious question is that the order is fairly strange. Because first you mention Tsar Gidul Bonim, the pain of raising children, then you mention the pain of pregnancy and the pain of labor. I mean, we would put it differently. We would say, first there's the pain of pregnancy, then the pain of labor, childbirth, and then after that comes Tsar Gidul Bonim, the pain of raising children. Because why mention Tsar Gidul Bonim first? I once heard a very clever answer to this question, because according to Chazal, Cain and Hevel were born before the Chet of the Eitz Hadas. So she already had children, so she was going to have Tsar Gidul Bonim before she had the pain of her next pregnancy and childbirth. Okay, it's a clever answer. I think the question is better than the answer. There's also a more fundamental question, which is that it's clear that we should understand that these curses are not meant to be punishments in the conventional sense. Because if they were punishments, they should be given to Chava alone. She committed the Chet, she should be punished. If all her descendants are afflicted with these conditions, Tsar Gidul Bonim and the pain of pregnancy and the pain of labor, that means these are consequences of the Chet. Meaning it's not so much a punishment as a natural consequence. You commit the Chet of the Eitz Hadas, a new reality is introduced. Now all these processes have to involve pain. So how do we understand that? What did the Chet of the Eitz Hadas cause that these processes that would have been painless now have to be painful? Now it's very interesting to note that when it says here that the Chet of the Eitz Hadas introduced Tsar Gidul Bonim, l'chara, it doesn't mean that until then child rearing was painless. It means there was no process of child rearing. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says that about the birth of Cain and Hevel, that Shnayim olu lamita v'arba yardu, that 2 went up to the bed and 4 came down, meaning that Cain and Hevel were born as adults. I would conjecture small adults, but there was no process of child rearing, no process of development, no process of growth. So when Tsar Gidul Bonim was introduced as a consequence of the Chet, it isn't that previously Gidul Bonim was painless and now Gidul Bonim is painful. It means there was no Gidul Bonim, and the consequence of the Chet is now there's a process of Gidul Bonim. So how do we understand that? I think the answer is as follows. There's a pasuk in Keheles which says, Toiv yeled miskein v'chacham, mimelech zaken uksil. That the child who is a miskein is a unfortunate person, but nevertheless wise, is greater than a king who is old and foolish. So what does this refer to? So the Medrash Rabbah says in Kehelas that the Yeled Miskein V'Chacham is the Yetzer Tov, and the Melech Zaken Uksil is the Yetzer Ra. So why are they given these titles? So the Medrash explains that the Yetzer Tov is Yeled. He's considered young, because you only get your Yetzer Tov when you're 13 years old, and your Yetzer Hara you're born with. So the Yetzer Hara is much older than the Yetzer Tov. So therefore the Yetzer Tov is called a Yeled, and the Yetzer Hara is called a Zaken. The Yetzer Tov is called a Miskein, a very unfortunate person, because no one listens to him. The Yetzer Hara is a Melech. Everyone listens to the Yetzer Hara. But on the other hand, this Yeled Miskein is a Chacham. He's very wise, because he guides you in the proper way. And the Melech Zaken is a fool, because the Yetzer Hara guides you to trouble. That's what the pasuk says. So what does it mean? What is this idea that the Yetzer Ra you're born with, and the Yetzer Tov you only get when you're 13? Why is that? It means like this. Rabbi Eliezer explains in the Igeras HaMusar that when Chazal speak about the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara, what are they speaking about? The Yetzer Hara are the natural desires of a human being. A person has a desire for food, he has a desire for drink, for sleep, for comfort, for pleasure. That's what the Yetzer Hara is. It's not be'etzem evil, but if it's not guided, if it's not restrained, it can lead to evil. That's the Yetzer Hara. What is the Yetzer Tov? The Yetzer Tov is the rational intellect that can determine al pi chachma, what is right, what is wrong, what should I do, what should I not do, to make decisions. That's the Yetzer Tov. Now we understand everything. The Yetzer Hara, because it's the natural desire of a human being, is born with the human being. It's born with the human being. A person is born with desires. A person is born with a desire to eat, a desire for pleasure, a desire for comfort. That's innate. It's part of the human being's makeup. But if the Yetzer Tov is the moral judgment, that has to be trained. That requires education. That requires learning. That requires development. And it requires das. It requires a level of intelligence. That level of intelligence a person has when he's bar mitzvah. We know that until then, a child is not called a bar das. He's not called as having the requisite level of legal intelligence to conduct a transaction. This is the age at which the das is sufficiently matured to exercise good judgment. And therefore, desire has a head start. You're born with desire, and judgment has to be cultivated, developed, it has to be trained, and that takes until the person is 13. But now we understand, before the chet, before there was desire, there was no need for the power of the intellect to balance and counteract desire. There was no process of development. But now that desire was introduced as a consequence of the chet, now we have a very dangerous period of time. We have a period of time where desire already has been activated, and yet the intelligence is not developed enough to deal and cope with desire. So therefore, what must we have now? We must have a stage of gidul banim. We have to have a stage where parents, and specifically the mother, has to raise the child, to protect the child from himself. Because until the child's intelligence, until his Yetzer Tov, so to speak, until his judgment, his rationality develops to the point where he takes care of his own desire, the mother has to nurture the child, take care of the child, protect the child. Sar Gidul Banim is not so much the question of who's going to change the diapers. Right? Tsar Gidul Banim is the question: who is going to guide the child, instruct the child, who's going to discipline the child? That's Tsar Gidul Banim. But there wouldn't have been Tsar Gidul Banim if there wasn't the introduction of desire. Until there was the Yetzer Hara that was introduced by the Chet, there was no need for this extended period of Gidul. But now that the Yetzer Hara was introduced as a consequence of the Chet, now you have the situation of imbalance. Because the force for evil is innate and natural. The force for good requires development and cultivation. It takes as much as 13 years. So who's going to protect the child from himself in the meantime? That's the job of a mother. That's Tsar Gidul Banim. That's the difficulty. So if not for the Chet, there wouldn't have been this period of Gidul Banim. Because what creates the necessity for this period is this imbalance between the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara, between the desire and the intellect. But if desire would not have been a factor, then you wouldn't have needed this period of Gidul. That's really what happens. So it comes out that this is mamish, not a punishment, but it is a consequence of the Chet. If the Chet introduced desire, that memela creates the necessity for Gidul Banim. And Gidul Banim, if you have to raise children, there's tsar, it's difficult. There's setbacks, there's difficulties. There's no such thing as Gidul Banim without tsar. Maybe there's no Gidul Banim. But once there has to be Gidul Banim, then there's tsar. There's pain associated with it. It's unavoidable. And I'll just mention as an aside, nothing to do with the shear, but you should know that where people try to escape the tsar Gidul Banim, they usually get a bad result. Because if you have a child that you never discipline, and you figure, why do I need the pain of discipline? Let me just give in to every desire that he has. Usually it doesn't work out. Usually you have a monster that's created as a result. So therefore, Tsar Gidul Banim is a necessity. You can't avoid the tsar. If you don't have the tsar, that difficulty, that pain, you're probably not doing a very good job of Gidul Banim anyway. So this is the reality. So we're not talking about a punishment. It's not that Chava committed a sin, so the oynesh is that now she has Tsar Gidul Banim. The very nature of the Chet, by introducing desire, creates the necessity for Gidul Banim. Now there's another question over here is that what motivates a person to want to be Megadol Banim? What motivates a person to want to exert that effort in raising a child? I think the answer is very simple. If you have an investment in something, you don't want to lose your investment. By the time a child is born, a mother has a massive investment in the child. First of all, the mother carried the child for 9 months. She has a major investment in the process of delivering the child, the labor of the child. So therefore, the mother, at the moment the child was born, the mother already has a major investment, much more than the father's investment. And therefore, that's why, it seems to me, though this may be anecdotal, it seems to me that mothers are much more involved and invested in the child rearing from the very beginning than fathers are. Fathers, artificially, you have to involve them in the process. So we tell the fathers they should be there in the delivery room, they should watch, they should be involved, so the modern father, artificially, is involved in the process of child rearing, so he should also feel this level of connection. But for the mother, it's natural, because she has a tremendous investment already in advance. And that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu set up the Teva that way. Because there's going to be a process of Gidul Banim, which is going to require the mother to exert a lot of effort for that child. She has to be invested in the child before the period of Gidul Banim. So the Rebbeinu Shalom B'Chachmaso set up the system in such a way that even before the birth, the mother already is invested in the child. Because she already has the experience of carrying him for 9 months. She already has gone through the labor, and therefore she has so much invested, she wants to preserve her investment, and therefore she is involved in the Gidul Banim. So that's why the order of the Parsha, the order of the Klolos is exactly in that order. Because the Iker consequence of the Chet is the fact that there's Tsar Gidul Banim. But in order that the mother should be motivated to rise to the challenge of Gidul Banim, So the Rebbeinu Shalom set up such a system that she already should have experienced the Tsar Ibur and the Tsar Leida, the Tsar of pregnancy and the Tsar of birth, and that's what the Torah puts it exactly in that order. In other words, I'm going to increase the Tsar Gidul Banim, and to make sure that you carry out your obligations of Gidul Banim, I will make sure that you're investing in advance by making the process involve a tremendous sacrifice on your part in terms of Tsar Ibur and Tsar Leida. And that's why the order is precise in the Psukim. Rav Hirsch says an amazing thing in our parsha, the parsha of Yoledes. Rav Hirsch says, what is the difference between the Yoledes Zochar and the Yoledes Nekeva? Why is it that the days of Tumah are double? So Rav Hirsch says a conjecture, which we're going to try to expand upon. He says that this period, the period of 40 days or 80 days, is really a period of hachana. It's a period of preparation for the mother to fulfill her tafkid, her purpose, as being the primary caretaker of the child. And we all know that. And the mothers really raise the children. And that requires preparation. She has to be devoted and dedicated to that mission. And this is a period of spiritual preparation. It culminates with bringing karbanos from the Beis Hamikdash. But that's what it really is. It's a period of spiritual preparation for her tafkid. Says Rav Hirsch, that explains why there is more preparation necessary for the Yoledes Nekeva than for the Yoledes Zohar. And he doesn't explain it fully, but I'll put it this way. There really are two components to education. There's the actual nurturing and guiding of the child, and there's the being the role model for the child. If a woman has a little boy, so it's true that the mother is nurturing the child, and the mother is encouraging the child, and the mother is disciplining the child, but who is the role model for that little boy? The father. In other words, the mother, through her discipline, through her nurturing, is sending the message, be like your father. Or at least hopefully that's the way it should work. If everything is as it should be. If she's sending the message, don't be like your father, there are deeper problems. But in the ideal situation, what the mother is telling the child is, be like your father. Look at your father. He's a Talmid Chacham, he's an Eved Hashem, he's a Yirei Shemayim. He fulfills his roles as a Jewish man. This is what you should aspire to be. So the mother is the nurturer, the mother is the guide, the mother is the educator, but the role model is the father. But if it's a little girl, then the mother is both. She is both the nurturer and the educator and the role model. What she's telling the child is, do this and don't do this and avoid this and work on this in order to be like what? To be like me. That's a much greater responsibility. And therefore the Yoledes Nekeva, says Rav Hirsch, requires a double period of preparation. The Yoledes Zochar only requires a preparation of 40 days, but the Yoledes Nekeva requires a preparation of 80 days, because it's a double mission, it's a double purpose. That's what Rav Hirsch says. So I would say that this is all ultimately related to the chet of Chava. It was the consequence of the chet of Chava that there has to be a Gidul Banim, there has to be a raising of children. If not for the chet, there would be no process of Gidul. The whole process of Gidul is because of this imbalance between the natural desires and the rational intellect. The natural desire is the Melach Zakin Uksil, and the rational intellect is the Yelad Miskein B'Chacham. And therefore, in that initial period, you have to have the input and the encouragement and the discipline of a good mother. So it all, as Rabbi Eliezer says, is a consequence of the chet. But in this sense, that because there is a chet, therefore there has to be a gidul, therefore there has to be preparation. There has to be preparation for the process. I think we can understand now, perhaps, a mahalech in the whole idea of tumas yoledes bechlal. Why is it tumah? There's an amazing Rambam in the Pirush Mishnayos in Maseches Para. Para Gimel Mishnah Gimel. It's an amazing Rambam. The Rambam says the following. Let's say you have two people. One person never became tamei in his life. Never became tamei. He avoided all sources of tumah. The other person became tamei. He was sprinkled with the mechatas, the waters of the paraduma. He went to the mikveh, and now he's tar. Which one is more tar than the other? The person who never became tamei, or the person who became tamei and now was purified? Who is more tar? So the Rambam says a surprising thing. The Rambam says the person who once became tamei is more tar, in some sense, more tar than the other person. Says the Rambam, why? Because the person who never became tamei, the Torah never testified upon him that he's tar. The Torah never said that person is tar. There's no pasuk in the Torah which says that a person who never became tamei is tar. But there are psukim which say that a person who became tamei and was sprinkled with the mechatas and went to the mikveh is tar. So here the Torah declared him tar. There it just happens to be he's tar because he never became tamei. So that person is in a higher madrega of tara than the person who never became tamei. That's what the Rambam says. But the truth is that even without the Rambam's proof, because here the Torah testified that he's tar, there the Torah didn't testify he's tar, logically we understand that. Because if a person works on himself to achieve a madrega of tara, that's a much greater level of tara than a level of tara that just fell into my lap because I never became tamei. Almost in the same sense that Chazal say that makom shvalei tshuva oimdim ein tzadikim gemur michalam lamed, because the level of refinement that the tzaddik gomer who never sinned achieves is something which came naturally. He was born that way. He had no desire. Whereas the Baal Tshuva works to achieve that madrega, so in a sense he's loftier because it's something that did not come naturally. It had to be worked for and worked on. It's a higher level. If Rav Hirsch's conjecture is correct, the Torah wants the Yoledes to achieve a level of refinement that prepares her for her mission, to educate her child, to train her child, to raise her child. And that's why there's a chiluk between the Yoledes Zoch and the Yoledes Nekeva, because her obligations to raise the little girl are greater than her obligations to raise the little boy. So if the Torah wants her to prepare herself for the tafkid, that's where the Torah places tumah upon her. It's not that she did something unclean or she came in contact with something unclean. The Torah places the tumah upon her so that the tara that she achieves won't just be a tara that is because she never became tamei. It's a tara that she achieves through her effort to cleanse herself. So the Torah places a tumah upon her so that the resulting tara that comes about through her effort will be a real tara, a real refinement, a real purity, so that she can then carry this forward in the raising of her child. So it would be a novel type of tumah, not a tumah because she touched something tamei or she did something impure or did something wrong. It's a tumah which the Torah creates so that when she cleanses herself, it'll be a level of tara beyond what she would have had she only never become tamei. Al Kaparim, this is the idea of tumas yoledes, and this is the chiluk zachar and the nekeva. And now we understand, perhaps, what is unique about the chatas of the yoledes, the karbonos of the yoledes, I should say, that the oila comes before the chatas. The Gemara points out that whenever the carbon comes for a chet, so you have the chatas before the oila. The chatas is the praklit, the chatas gets us off the hook, the oila is a doroi. By the yoledes, really she didn't commit any chet. She didn't commit any chet. She's preparing herself to achieve a madrega that she never was on before. The Torah placed a tumah upon her so that she should strive and achieve a madrega of Torah in preparation for her mission, a madrega which she never achieved. There's a famous story that Rabbi Tazria that's told. Often the story is told during Elul, that the Hamidim were watching him, and they looked through his the keyhole of his doorway, and they saw that he was mamash, he was crying, he was saying viduyim, he was being mispalo, asking forgiveness, and they couldn't understand. He was such a big tzaddik. What is he asking forgiveness for? So he explained to them, according to the legend, that in his avodah every day he rose to higher and higher madregas, and on his new madrega he understood that what he had done yesterday was beneath him, almost begeder a chet. Yesterday wouldn't have been a chet. It was yesterday kefi madregasa, it was totally appropriate. But now, having achieved a loftier madrega, it was something that was beneath him. It required a kapara, it required viduyim, it required forgiveness. And the truth is that in Avodas Hashem it's like that, often. In other words, a person looks in the mirror, makes the cheshbon nefesh, doesn't see anything wrong. But as he works on himself, as he develops himself, as he attains the higher madrega, then he understands that there are things that really I've done in the past. At the time, I didn't see anything wrong with them. They were totally appropriate. But now, kefi the madrega I've achieved, I see it's deficient. This isn't something I should have done. This is something that requires kapar, requires cleansing. That's the idea of the chatas which follows the oila. That this yoledes, through her extended period, the 40 days, the 80 days, has achieved such a lofty madrega, and that lofty madrega is sealed with the carbon oila. The carbon oila is a total hisbatlus, a total bittul to the Ratzon Hashem. It's followed by a chatas. Because once you achieve that higher madrega, the madrega of oila, then you realize that there are things that at the time maybe weren't sinful, but now they need a kapara. That's the chatas which comes after the oila. It's different than every other case. In every other case, I'm bringing the carbon for a chet, which kefi my madrega is a chet. Right? I ate chaylev, whatever I did. I'm bringing a chatas for a chet. So sometimes the Torah says you bring a chatas in a oila. The chatas is the praklit. The chatas gains atonement for me. The oila is the dorot. I now send the gift. So there, the oila is only a gift. Here it's the opposite. The oila brings me to a very lofty madrega. At that madrega, I understand that not everything is as it should be. So I bring the chatas that follows the oila. See, there's some insights in the parsha of Yoledes. But the main thing we should take out of this is, even though most of us in the room are not mothers, we're fathers, we also have a role to play. And the chinuch of children is a very, very important thing. And what it says over here is that to be machanach your children, you have to achieve a madrega in your own right. You have to achieve a madrega in your own right. If you don't achieve in your own life a lofty madrega, there's no hope in machanach your children. I mean, there are stories that people went to Gedolei Torah and asked for advice. What can I do to encourage my child to learn? And the Gedolei answered, learn yourself. If you learn yourself, your children want to learn. Right? I see this from experience. I see this so often. Parents wonder why their children have no cheshek, why their children have no desire, why they're not motivated. And it's very difficult to look a parent in the eye and say, this kasha is b'chalal, not a kasha that you're asking. it makes perfect sense. So instead we hem and haw. But the reality is that if the children don't see their parents davening properly and learning properly and feeling a chashivas for mitzvahs and addicted for mitzvahs, naturally the children aren't going to be any better. They will be chips off the old black. In the story of Shimshon, so when the Malach came to Shimshon's mother and told her that you should avoid eating anything that comes from the grapevine, etc., because your son is going to be a Nazir, so that we understand. We know that a woman who's pregnant, whatever she eats, somehow finds its way through the bloodstream into the child, so we understand that the child's meant to be a Nazir, so therefore the mother shouldn't eat any of those things. But the Malach, the second time, came back, and when Manoach, Shimshon's father, asked, what should we be careful about? So he said, it's a question exactly how to translate that pasuk, because tishamir can be the third person female or the second person male. So it isn't clear what the Malach was telling him. Was he just reiterating that whatever comes from grapes she should avoid, or was the Malach adding that you should avoid? So machlekes from the Mefarshim. But assuming that what the Malach was telling him is that you should also avoid it, here we have to wonder, why should that be? Why should that be? Again, that the mother should avoid it, we understand, because whatever the mother eats goes into the bloodstream to the child. Why should the father avoid it? The answer is very simple. Because if you're trying to raise a child to be a Nazir, you can't raise a child to be a Nazir in an environment where the father isn't a Nazir. So therefore the Malach added, it's not enough that she should avoid the things that are forbidden to a Nazir, you also have to avoid the things forbidden to a Nazir. Even though it's not going to go from your bloodstream into the child, but in terms of pedagogy, you can't be mechanech a child to a standard you don't maintain yourself. And therefore the key to raising successful children is not so much the methodology of how you speak to them and what you say to them and using the right words. The real key is to make something of yourself. If you make something of yourself, this is what the children will want to be. And therefore that is the aleph base, the haschala of the chinuch of a child is this period of the yoledes. The yoledes preparing herself for the 40 days, for the 80 days, culminating and coming to the Beis Hamikdash, bringing korbanos, bringing the korban oila, bringing the chatas that follows the oila, which means an understanding that she's achieved a new madrega at which even the things that were acceptable in the past now are no longer acceptable, now require atonement. The achievement of that madrega, that's the haschala, that's the beginning, that's the groundwork for the chinuch of this child. And that's, I think, the musar of this parsha of the Yoledes. And it's something that is applicable not only to mothers, but to fathers as well.